We'll get started in just a minute, but give everyone a little bit of time to enter along. We're all potentially going to be pretty well-sized group today, which is exciting. A lot of you keen to come to Australia. As you can probably hear, I am in Australia. I am Australian. So, beaming in from Melbourne, and we've got Darren who's in Perth.
Hi everyone, it's Darren from Visa Go. I'm a registered migration agent, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have about the process of migrating to Australia. So do jump on board and get those questions happening, and hopefully I'll be able to answer them for you.
Speaking of questions, feel free to pop them in the chat at any point in time. Later on, we might be able to let you unmute and ask them verbally if you prefer that way. So we'll be having the question time at the end after we go through a bit of information and then a few frequently asked questions. All right, it is 2 past, so we might kick off. So I'm Camille, a University Engagement and International Support Coordinator at anzuk.education. At the moment, I am supporting the UK to Australia group of educators that are hoping to make it into the country as soon as possible. And as Darren said, he's a migration agent, has all the qualifications, all the right numbers after his name. So it's definitely a good person to talk to about visas and to trust with your application if you decide to go through them. And you can definitely get great updates and insights if you jump on their website. They do post news items, and they're on Twitter and Facebook as well.
Okay, no problems. Well, come on, I might as well just jump in there. Yeah, it's important just to make sure that if you are going to use someone or get migration advice, that they are licensed through the Migration Registration Authority, which is called MAR. And you can see on the slide there my MAR number, 0211214. So it's important that the person you do speak to is registered. And I have about 20 years of experience in helping people migrate to Australia. And Visa Go, we have an office in London, which is managed by Sue, an office in Edinburgh, which is managed by Kimberly, and I'm currently the same as Camille. I'm in Australia, basically about 2 hours south of Perth, working in our West Australian office.
Rick's popped, there's a couple of questions in the chat already, actually. Graham's mentioned he's the wrong side of 40. Are there any specific processes he needs to follow?
Was it 40 or 45?
Oh, sorry, 45.
I think it popped up.
Yep,
45,
it is 45, yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. So for the skilled visas, unfortunately, the cut-off age is 45 years of age. Probably about a year ago, the Australian government tried it at 50, but they've reduced it back to 45. So if you're over 45 years of age, the skilled visa isn't an option for you. There are some exceptions on the age which goes up to 55 in the business visa area, and also the employee-sponsored 482 doesn't have an age restriction. The problem with that is, though, if you do go to Australia on that visa, trying to get permanent residency to stay will be difficult off that particular visa. So if you'd like to email me later on, I need to know your certain circumstances to see whether a business visa is an option, and we may be able to get you still out to Australia if you're under the age of 55.
And Rick's popped in a question if you wanted to address that one as well before we get started.
Sorry, Camille, the questions aren't coming up on my screen.
Sure. So Rick's just said, does agent imply there will ultimately be a fee involved?
Yes, that is correct. So most registered agents, unless they're doing a Bofana, which is for free, they will charge a fee. If you look at our website, you can go onto our website and all our fee structures are on our website. The fee structure usually changes depending on the experience of the agent, and a lot of agents work in specific areas. So, for example, myself, I specialise in skilled visas, parent visas and partner visas. And our fees roughly range anywhere from around about £1,800 for a 189 up to about £2,100 for a state-sponsored or something with a criminal or a medical issue, which takes more work.
All right. So we'll get started with some of the information we wanted to share with everyone. So just as a brief border update, there are still future updates that will be needed, but Australia is set to begin a bit of a staged reopening of borders upon reaching the vaccination milestone of 80% of the population 16 plus being fully vaccinated. This is occurring in November, but it won't be including all visa types. So working holiday visas and temporary skilled shortage visa holders won't be permitted yet based on this sort of staged reopening. Entry will be via New South Wales, and the requirement to quarantine will be removed for those that are fully vaccinated and who have returned a negative test. Did you want to add anything on this, Darren, at the moment?
Yeah, so just expanding on that, basically if you're an Australian citizen, permanent resident, or a partner of an Australian citizen, and as of Monday, parents of Australian citizens, you don't need a travel exemption to come to Australia. A lot of people are under the illusion that tourists and working holiday visas, it has opened, but we don't expect that to open in the new year. You can apply for working holiday visas and skilled visas at the moment, but until the actual Australian government allow temporary visa holders in, it won't be till the new year.
So we'll have to keep an eye on the news and future updates on that. So it did mention fully vaccinated people able to not quarantine. So just to give you an idea about the vaccinations in Australia, the Australian Therapeutic Goods Administration has provisionally approved 4 vaccines. So the AstraZeneca, Vaxzevria, Moderna's Spikevax, Pfizer's I should have practiced these, Comirnaty, or however you say it, and COVID-19 vaccine Janssen. They're the ones that are approved, and then some vaccines are also recognized. So Coronavac, Sinovac, and COVID Shield, the AstraZeneca Serum and Serum Institute of India collaboration vaccine. Having any of these will mean that you're regarded as appropriately vaccinated. So if you've got your 2 doses, then you'll be considered fully vaccinated when coming to Australia. So some of the visa options that are sort of most likely for everyone would be the skilled independent visa or working holiday visa. They'll be the 2 that we're probably talking about the most, but then of note are the skilled nominated visa, so subclass 190, which is a state-sponsored visa, skilled nominated visa subclass 491, which is a state regional sponsored visa, and then employer sponsored visas, and there's a few different options there.
Okay, so did you want me to go through those with you, Carmel?
Oh yeah, actually, yeah, we'll dwell on this for a moment.
Okay, all right. So at the moment, the 189 is a 5-year permanent residency visa, which is the ideal visa. It's the gold visa because it allows you to move to Australia, live anywhere in Australia, and work in any occupation and for any employee. I've just been onto the Australian government website, and you can check this yourselves. The website is imi.homeaffairs.gov.au, or you can just Google invitation round for skilled visas for Australia, and it'll pop up. And what that does, it lets you know how many invitations were issued. And the last invitation round for 189 was on the 26th of July, and there was only 250 invites for the whole world. So it shows you that there's very limited. And the pass mark for that was 80 points. But I was saying to Camille earlier on today, we haven't seen any 189s come through our system probably for nearly 8 months because it's just been a hold on that for COVID. So the most popular visas at the moment is the state-sponsored, which is the 190 and the 491 state-sponsored visas, whereas the points are only 65. And then if you do get an invite from a government or state government, then the Australian government will invite you to apply for that visa. So the majority of you will be looking for the state-sponsored 190s and 491 visas. It may also be a benefit also to look at the 417, which is the 12-month working holiday visa. So if you're under 31 years of age with a UK passport, or if you've got an Irish passport, you can be up to the age of 35. When Australia does open for temporary visa holders, that will get you out to Australia for up to a year. And then you can start work as a teacher or in some other occupation if you want. And that could then lead to a stepping stone visa like the state-sponsored. So you may want to be able to plan out your migration progress to Australia by using the working holiday. And the bottom visas there, the employee-sponsored, when you're in Australia, they will all become prevalent as well. So if you're a teacher working in Victoria on your working holiday visa, ANZ UK have organised a job for you to work. After 3 or 4 months, you may think, well, okay, the company or the employer wants to sponsor me for up to 4 years, then you can transfer over onto the 482 visa. So getting into Australia on the 417 working holiday visa is a good idea because it opens up a lot more options for you for state sponsorship and employee sponsorship. So hopefully that's given you a general overview of any of those visas. If you have any questions about them, by all means, just let us know.
Rick mentioned the low number that you were talking about. Can you give us a bit of an idea about what pre-COVID, what the how many invitations were issued for those visas? Is it just as a ballpark?
Yeah, sure. Look, I mean, before COVID, maybe 18 months or longer, 2 years ago, you were getting anywhere between 2,000 and previous to that up to 5,000 invites per month. So as you can see, it's been a huge reduction in the amount of skilled visas being able to get into Australia. And the Australian government is really only concentrated on the occupations that are on the PM SOL, which is the Priority Migration Skilled Occupations list. I think there's 44 occupations on that list. And at the moment, they're the only occupations that are able to get into Australia via employee sponsorship. And the only other options are the state-sponsored. They're still being processed as well. And they're not subject to an actual cap, which is why the state sponsorship is a good option for teachers based in the UK.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. And Graham's asked in the chat, are the employer-sponsored visas rare for teachers? Yeah, so there's a couple of different aspects to this. It's quite rare for a school to sponsor a teacher that is offshore because a school likes to have seen the teacher in action in their school before feeling confident and comfortable to go through that sponsorship process. The schools need to demonstrate that they have tried to hire a teacher that is local before they are able to enter in that sort of that sponsorship process as well. It does mean that it's not particularly common for schools to sponsor. There are certain schools that do. Some are more comfortable and confident with that process than others, but it is something that ANZ Education do try and support schools that we partner with in and show them that it can be an option for them. And then Joe's put in, you've read that working holiday visas only allow you to work for a single company for a maximum of 6 months. What would the process be when that deadline occurs? So when we know that you're on a working holiday visa, we would be either assisting you with casual relief teaching or either or placing you in short-term contracts. The one you can work for ANZ UK for your full-time here in Australia because the employer stipulation also relates to location. which is a kind of a funny thing. So if you're working through an agency, you're going to multiple locations. And so you're able to stay under us as an employer, but there's that the change of location. And also another way to potentially work for the same school, but for longer than 6 months, is if the school has multiple campuses and you might be based at one campus for 6 months and then a different campus for another 6 months. So that's kind of a funny way around that rule. Great. All right. Well, we'll get into some of the other information. So Australia does, if you're going for a skilled worker visa, Australia will require you to have a positive skills assessment of the occupation that you're looking to come under. So if you're a teacher, then you would need to have that positive skills assessment. And these, so you'd need to have either a 3-year Bachelor of Education, a 3-year Bachelor plus a PGCE, or a 3-year Bachelor plus a Master of Teaching. So that's for a positive skills assessment, but it's also to be able to register as a teacher in one of the states or territories, because they have a similar requirement for considering you a teacher. So even if you're coming on a working holiday visa and you don't need that skills assessment, you'd need to keep that in mind for your teaching registration. There is a weird little loophole that you can get through if you've got a 3-year degree by registering in New Zealand and then applying to an Australian registration body through something called mutual recognition. But that can be costly. But if that's something that you need to consider, we can talk about that at another occasion. So talking a bit more about that registration. So some visas linked to your skill or occupation do require that skills assessment, and you might require your visa to obtain your registration. Sorry, hang on. Some visas may require you to have your registration to be able to obtain the visa, but then you also require the visa to obtain the registration, which is a pickle, but the registration bodies are aware of it. So it's just a matter of getting in contact with them to talk through that process. And each state and territory has their own teaching authority, which is slightly annoying for people coming to Australia if they don't know which state they want to live in. But we can again work through that. Early childhood educators also need to have their a separate assessment through a body called a CEQA. But again, probably a thing for another occasion. So Lauren's just mentioned a question in the chat. You've got a psychology degree looking to qualify as a teacher on a 1-year course. Would you need to do the 3-year course to be considered a teacher? Okay, so you've got a 3-year Bachelor of Psychology, I think is what you're saying. If you do a PGCE on top of that, that means that you are qualified as a teacher. So it's a 4-year or equivalent. I hope that's cleared things up. But yeah, let me know if there's still any confusion on that one.
Yeah. Come on,
right.
Just on that point as well,
Yep.
if the person is looking to maximise their opportunities of migrating to Australia as a teacher, just to make people aware that primary school teacher is on the STSOL, which is really the secondary skilled list, and secondary school teacher is on the MLTSL, which is the main skilled list. The difference being is secondary school teacher can apply for a 189 and a 491 family sponsored visa because it's on the main list, whereas primary school teacher must apply for state sponsorship either through the 190 or the 491. So I thought I'd just put that out there if you're swithering on whether you want to be a primary school teacher or a secondary. For migration purposes, a secondary school teacher would give you a lot more visa options.
Yeah, that's right. Also, early childhood teachers and special education teachers are both on the main list, I believe, as well. So that's something else to think about if there's anyone in that space listening today. So yeah, to dig into the skilled worker visa a little bit more, Darren, what is an expression of interest and how does that process work?
Okay, so if you're looking to migrate to Australia under the skilled visa category, you can lodge what's called an expression of interest. The first stage of lodging your expression of interest would be to get your skills assessed through AITSL, which we just covered earlier on. Another thing that you'd probably need to do is do the English exam as well. A lot of people say, well, I'm English, I have a British passport, why do I have to do the English exam? It's purely about claiming extra points. It's that competitive at the moment for skilled visas, that the more points you have, the better chance you are going to have of getting an invite from the Australian government to apply. So if you can do an English language test, something along the lines of the IELTS or TOEFL or Pearson's, if you get a medium score, so for example, IELTS, if you get 7 in all 4 areas, you can claim 10 bonus points for English. And if you're lucky enough to get 8s in all 4 areas of the IELTS, you can claim 20 points. So you don't have to do the English test, but probably 99% of our clients do because they need the extra points to put themselves at the top of the invitation pile on getting a visa. So if you're lodging an expression of interest for a skilled visa, the first thing is your skills assessment, your English language test. You can go onto the Australian government website once you've got those 2 assessments completed and lodge an expression of interest. It will calculate the points that you need. You currently need a minimum of 65 points to be able to lodge an expression of interest. And if you have got 65 points, you can then lodge that, and that will sit in a pool for up to 2 years. And what that does, you can tick the box for a 189 and say for a secondary school teacher, you have 85 or 90 points. When the Australian government starts allocating more visas for that particular category, then you'll be in with a good chance of getting an invite to apply for the visa. I was talking to Carmel earlier on today as well. You can also tick other boxes. You have all the options on there. So you can also tick 189. You might want to go to Queensland. So you may want to tick a 190 box and choose Queensland as your state of choice. And you can also tick the 419 box, which is a designated regional visa, which means you wouldn't be able to work in Brisbane, but you can work anywhere outside of Brisbane, Cairns, or somewhere usually about an hour, hour and a half out of the city centre. So you can tick that box as well. And what that does, it means not only the Australian government can see your expression of interest that you want to migrate to Australia, the states can also see that as well. So if you've ticked Queensland, when they actually start sponsoring teachers, can go in, look at the system, see that you've got 80, 85 points in there, you tick their boxes for sponsorship, and they will invite you to apply for state sponsorship, either 190 or a 491 visa. There's lots of different ways of getting your points, whether you're single or you have a partner, your work experience. So if you go onto our website, you can actually do a free assessment. And once you do that, we generate your points and you know how many points you can receive and get. But like I say, the first point is lodging an expression of interest. And if you have made the decision to migrate to Australia, even though a lot of the borders and the options are limited, it's a good idea to get into the system because it'll probably take 4 or 5 months before you get your skills assessment and English language test. So get yourself in the system, at least then when the Australian government start inviting people and the state governments look, you'll actually be in the pool and be at the front of the queue.
If both adults in a family are teachers, would we be more attractive as a package to Australian government / states?
Well, yes. If both of you are teachers, what you really need to do is look and see who's going to get the most points. So, for example, if one of the applicants is 31 years of age, they'd be getting a maximum of 30 points for age. If the partner is 34, then they'd only be getting 25 points for age. So there's a difference of 5 points there already. Maybe the person who's a bit older has got 8 years experience as a secondary school teacher, and the person who's younger has only got 3 years. Well, there'd be a difference in points, because 3 years work experience as a teacher will give you 5 points, whereas 8 years gives you 15 points. So what I would do is pick out the person who's going to score the most points, lodge an expression of interest for them. You can also get a double skills assessment. So you can both do the skills assessment, include your partner, and claim an extra 5 points for the partner having a skills assessment as well. So to answer your question, yes, both of you being secondary school teachers means that you'll score extra points. But the way to lodge an expression of interest is to use the person who would get the most points as an individual. Okay.
Great. So how much does the visa application process cost?
Okay. Oops, sorry, I'm just trying to get up to the slide. Okay, so if you're looking for a skilled, visa, the Australian government fee is charging 4,115 Australian dollars for the main applicant. If you have a partner, the fee is 2,060 Australian dollars. And if you have any children under 18 years of age, it's 1,030 Australian dollars. If you're looking for a working holiday visa, I think it's approximately around about 385 Australian dollars. And your employee-sponsored visas, the Australian employer usually pays all the fees, especially at the moment, because there's a huge demand, as Camille can prelude, that there's demand for a lot of teachers in and around Australia. So a lot of employers are happy to pick up the tabs on the visa fees if they're sponsoring you under the employee-sponsored visa.
Great. And where does the where in the process do you actually have to pay the application fee? Yeah,
so I suppose the start is doing the skills assessment through AITSL. Actually, off the top of my head, I'm not too sure what they charge. I think
that is a good question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's about 400 Australian dollars, but I'd have to. Well, here we go. Let's have a look. Whew, no, it's gone up a lot. Application for skills assessment is 1,050 Australian dollars. Wow. Okay, so that's increased a lot. So if you're lodging a skilled visa, I'm assuming most of you will be looking at a skilled visa if you're coming from the UK and moving to Australia. So it's 1,050, which is paid up front when you do the skills assessment. You'd have to do your English language test. Last time I checked, it was roughly around about £180 if you're doing the English language test in the UK. Then you can lodge your expression of interest, which is actually free. When you get an invite from the Australian government and lodge your visa, that's when the Australian government fees will be due. So if it takes you 5 or 6 months to get an invite, that's when the Australian government fees are going to be due. Now, if you're going state-sponsored, the state government sponsors you first, then you'd have to do their application and pay their fees. And the various states charge anywhere from 200 Australian dollars up to 750, depending on which state. So once you've done all those fees and you've lodged your visa, probably in about 4 or 5 months' time, you'd have to do your medicals. Adult medicals are approximately between £350 and £450 per adult. If the child is under 12, they would only have to do a medical. So you're probably looking at around about £280, and they don't have to do the chest x-ray. So that would be approximately your cost. I suppose if you want an overall figure for a single teacher looking for a skilled visa, you could probably budget between, say, £4,500 to £5,500 for the actual visa by the time you've done everything. Yeah.
Right, great. I think we've touched on the next question that we had in the slides, but with the primary teachers skilled visa. So we'll get on to the next one. And we did briefly touch on this. There is, so special education teachers and early childhood teachers are still on that main skilled list, and there is a high demand. So special education schools are, of all schools, more likely to sponsor. But again, there is that preference for them to be onshore. And again, early childhood centres also are known to be more likely to sponsor as well, just because there is, they do find it hard to find those quality educators. And we have discussed sponsorship by schools. So how many years experience post-qualification do I need to apply for a skilled worker visa?
Well, technically you don't have to have any work experience, but what that means is you'll be getting 0 points for work experience, because under the skilled visa category, if you've got 3 years full-time paid employment, it's 5 points. 5 years is worth 10, and 8 years is worth 15. The other issue you'll probably have is if you've got very little experience, maybe less than a year or 2 years, then the state governments probably won't offer you sponsorship. If you check the state government sponsorship requirements, they usually need a teacher to have possibly 2 up to 5 years experience before offering sponsorship. So you don't need it to lodge an expression of interest, but the more experience you have, the more points you score, and the higher chances are of getting state sponsorship.
Yeah, okay, great. I just noticed Joe had put something in the chat about being surprised about the chest x-ray, and I'm wondering how detailed the medical assessment is. Do you have any knowledge about that, Darren?
Yeah, look, any skilled visa leads on to permanent residency. So the Australian government do a full medical and chest x-ray. The chest x-ray is basically for TB, tuberculosis. If you're over 12 years of age, you have to have the chest x-ray. Medicals, if you're fit and healthy, you'll pass the medical with flying colours. The things they're looking for is possibly HIV, Hep B, Hep C, anything that's pretty major. Probably in the last 20 years, I've only ever had 3 cases fail from medicals. One was, thank goodness the person did the medical, because when they did the medical, they picked up that they had cancer. So that basically saved their life. So that's a no-no. I actually had another one for rheumatoid arthritis. The gentleman was an actual mechanic. So the Australian government's reasoning behind that is that it was in his hands, and if the possibility of him not being able to work in the future was high, so they refused it. So it has to be pretty major for you to fail a medical. If the majority of you are fit and healthy and running around, then you should be fine. We may as well touch on the criminal side of things as well. As long as you haven't been sentenced to anything more than 12 months imprisonment, then you should be okay. A lot of people have a chat to me and say, oh, you know, I've got some parking fines and some speeding fines, etc. That's fine, as long as you pay them off, and there's no problems on that issue. So it has to be pretty major on the criminal side as well.
Yep, all right, great. Hopefully that clarified things a little bit. I think we have touched on this as well, Darren. Can you apply for a skilled worker visa at the moment? And we recommend doing so, or putting in the expression of interest.
Yep, great idea, because I mean, if you're not in, yep, sorry, go on, Camille.
Oh no, go on. Yep.
Yeah, like I said earlier, it's a good idea, and it's a good time to get your expression of interest in, because the Australian government is pulling down the requirements of people not being able to get into Australia, and the borders are opening. So I think it's all positive. So hopefully early next year or mid next year, I'd expect that the skilled visas will start to be allowed to come back in, and also the employee sponsored, and hopefully the working holiday visas will be allowed to come back into Australia as well, which is great news for everyone.
Yeah, and there is definitely a sense here in Australia, we were talking about before, there's quite a few occupations that we are noticeably short of. And so I think all of Australia is wanting to welcome in many people as quickly as possible. Is there anything new this year or this immigration year for skilled visas?
Nothing that stands out. I mean, the point system hasn't changed. The state sponsorship requirements is probably the key. I mean, at the moment, the majority of states are not offering sponsorship to overseas applicants. But I think that'll change in the new year because there are huge shortages in Australia of workers. There hasn't been any working holiday visas or students or employee-sponsored visas who haven't got an occupation on the PM SOL for nearly 18 months. So there's so much, there's so many jobs over here at the moment. I mean, I'm sitting in Western Australia, and a lot of the restaurants and hotels are struggling at the moment for chefs, waiters, front of staff. It's quite dire. So, getting employment in Australia will be good. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. And so to give you a bit of a sense about the teaching side of things as well, this past year, well, when lockdowns haven't been happening, there was a distinct shortage of casual teachers and also full long-term contracts. There was quite a few schools that were really struggling to find teachers, particularly the more regional schools. But there's a distinct shortage of teachers here. So there's going to be a lot of great opportunities when people can get into the country. So
Camille,
shift. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, Camille, you might know better, but I've also one of my friends was a teacher. I mean, he came to WA and went down to Albany. I don't know if it's still the case, but the pay structure in Australia is quite attractive as well. So I don't know if you have anything on that. Off the top of my head, I mean, he went to, I think he was one below the headmaster, and his starting pay was around about 90,000 Australian dollars. So I don't know if that's still the case, but that's not a bad salary for that level of teaching.
Yeah, it is actually different state to state. So I know in some for, I think it's leading teachers, or there's a couple of different levels of teachers within Victoria, for example, but you can be on over 100,000 at that sort of level, and then principal class is a whole different matter. But even with casual relief teaching, the rate is actually very attractive. So in Victoria, we pay based on experience. So a graduate teacher would be earning $335.70 per day, but an experienced teacher at a certain level of experience would be getting paid $385.70 per day. And then state to state, it does vary a little bit. Some of the states are a little bit higher, and I think some might be a bit lower, but it's quite an attractive salary. There are a couple of questions in the chat, so we might just quickly pause for that. So Hannah's just mentioned that she and her partner have already applied for a working holiday visa, ready to make the move as soon as borders allow. The only thing worrying them would be able to secure work before flying over, or do they need to touch down first before we can find them work and offer a start date? So as we were discussing before, with a working holiday visa, there is that limitation of the 6 months. So we could potentially help you obtain a contract position for your arrival. But if there was any uncertainty about when you might actually arrive, schools would then hesitate to offer you a contract. But depending on where you're going, we could definitely line up casual relief teaching, and that can be So in Melbourne, if you're coming to Melbourne, slightly depending on the time of year, we do have an ambassador program, which means that we can offer you a certain number of days per week guaranteed. And then if we weren't able to offer you that number of days actual work, we would still pay you that number of days. So there can be a bit of security even in that sort of uncertainty. And then Elliot said, is it possible to apply for a secondary teaching job whilst on a 408 visa? I can't remember what a 408 visa is. That one of the employer sponsored ones?
No, 408 is a COVID visa. So
right.
that person may be in Australia. Yeah, so once you're on a COVID visa, you, depending on which sort of visa you're going to apply for, it is restricted to some. So I'd have to know exactly what sort of visa he's looking to apply from off the 408. Did he actually say the visa, Carmel?
No, it was more about can you apply for a secondary teaching job while on that visa? So again, if there's the only one thing to keep in mind is if there's uncertainty about you continuing on in a visa or what you might be going on to next, schools may hesitate. But onshore applicants for all visas are getting priority. And we've got a question about the exchange rate. I don't know what the exchange rate is, but yeah, $90,000 is a good salary in Australia. You can live very comfortably on that.
Actually, the exchange rate probably about 3 weeks ago was close to 1.9. That's the highest it's been for over about a year. So, so coming from the UK has been good. You're probably looking at about 52 to 53,000 pounds for 90,000 Australian dollars for the exchange rate. But as Australia comes out of COVID, the economy gets stronger. I've been watching the exchange rate and it's down to now to about 183. So it's dropped about 7 cents in the last 2 to 3 weeks. So if you are looking to transfer some money, I'd probably suggest, not that I'm giving financial advice, to have a look at the exchange rates and maybe get some Aussie dollars in your pocket for your pound, because it's still pretty good rate at the moment, but it is slowly dropping as Australia's economy opens up and comes out of, well, COVID supposedly, yeah.
Okay, so Natalie has put in another question. Sorry if I missed this at the beginning. How much cheaper is it to get sponsorship? For sponsorship, do I apply for the job before starting the visa process? So if you're talking about state sponsorship, that's one matter, and that is a cheaper option of a skilled worker visa. If you're talking about school sponsorship, it is there's multiple factors involved in that. So you would need to have the school be initiating that process with you. So the job would need to be lined up, I guess.
Yeah, so the employee sponsored, if a school in Australia is going to sponsor you out to Australia, then you'd have to have the contract of employment, and that school would have to nominate you, and then you would have to apply for the visa. So you'd really have to have the job set up and ready to go to, because without that, you can't really lodge the visa. So on that front, with the skilled visa, if you're talking about state sponsored, then you lodge the expression of interest, get your information into the details. When you lodge your expression of interest, you can tick 190, 491, and you can pick the actual state that you actually want to go to. You can also tick the button all states. Now, just a little hint, if you're ticking the box for all states, basically what you're telling all the state governments is that you're not fussy and you'll go anywhere, which is not really good, because the state governments want people who are committed to go to that particular state. So think carefully if you're going to lodge an expression of interest and where you want to go, and preferably tick that state as a state you want to go. Don't tick the all states button, because we've found a lot of states won't pick people who actually pick that as an option.
Actually, on that, Darren, I was scratching my head about this earlier. If you are sponsored by a state, does that mean that you're locked into living in that state?
We get asked this a lot. It's not. It's not a condition of the visa. So the Australian government issued the visa. If it's a 190, it's a 5-year permanent residency visa. If South Australia sponsor you, you've signed a commitment statement saying that you're going to live in that state for a minimum of 2 years. So they're not going to be very happy if you sponsor to South Australia and fly straight into Sydney and never go to South Australia. So ethically, you shouldn't be doing that, but it's not a condition of the visa. If you go in under a 491, that's a designated regional area visa. So on a 491 sponsored to Queensland, you wouldn't be able to work in Brisbane. If you did move after, 2 years of living and working in regional Brisbane, you couldn't live in Sydney or Melbourne because they're not designated regional areas as well. So depends on what visa you have. If you have the 491, well, then you're restricted to only working in regional areas, not in the city centres.
Yep. And yeah, with the regional classifications, it's not just major cities necessarily. So you actually have to, you'd probably want to look into the postcodes a little bit as well, because I think Darwin is actually regional, but it is a city. So yeah, there's a couple of bits and pieces that can be a little bit confusing with that. Now, we've had a few more questions in the chat. So Alistair's asked, we're looking at the 189 visa. Is that $4,115 payable only once an application has been accepted in principle? So is there a risk that you could pay that amount and then have your visa application rejected?
Well, the answer is yes. Any visa fees paid to the Australian government, they don't usually like giving it back if your application is refused. So for a skilled visa, if you've got the points, the Australian government invited you, unless you've done the application wrong, you've claimed work experience incorrectly, or you haven't got the correct documentation to back up the points that you've claimed, the only way that you're going to fail is once you've applied is medical or criminal grounds. So you would know yourself, as we explained before, if you're fit and healthy and you've got no criminal convictions, as long as you've done the application correctly and you can back up all the points that you've claimed, then yeah, it's highly unlikely that you're going to be refused a visa.
Yep. Okay. Fantastic. And Megan, if I was to apply for the working holiday visa and decided to stay longer, can you apply for it again to stay for another 6 months? All right. So there might have been a little bit of confusion regarding that employer thing. So a working holiday visa is a year-long visa, and then there's the option to extend that by doing specified work, or tends to be referred to colloquially as farm work, because that's generally what it involves. Yeah, you do have that year-long visa. You can extend it for a second year if you're from the UK. If you're on an Irish visa, you can actually extend it for a third year, but there's an additional amount of regional or specified work that you need to be doing to be able to do that. We've got another question. How long do you have from being offered, invited to apply for your visa and making the payment
it's usually 90 days.
Yep.
Yeah. So if the Australian government give you an invite, you've got the 90 days to lodge the visa and pay for it. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, fantastic. And then once your visa has been approved, how long do you have to actually take up residence in Australia?
Yeah, the Australian government give you 12 months. So once you've got your visa granted, you've got 12 months to go out to Australia to activate the visa. Now, some people might their circumstances might change. So they go, oh, what do we do? Do we go out and stay? Well, what you can do is, say in 8 months' time, after getting your visa, go to Australia, enter Australia, activate your 5-year visa, and then you've got 5 years to go back and forth for that whole 5 years. So you could come back to the UK, sell your house, or wait for your child to finish schooling, or for whatever reason, and then go back and use the balance of your 5 years.
All right. And another question, is there an early years setting that's sponsoring people currently? Where are these roles advertised? Would ANZ UK be able to help with that? So we do have a permanent opportunities team that work on early childhood roles. I can't say a specific setting that's sponsoring currently. It's all very case by case. So the best option would be to discuss what your plans are with us, and then we could connect you with the early childhood team, who would then be able to look through, consider you for any of those options that might be available. Again, with all of the sponsorship, even as early childhood and SEN are more likely to sponsor, there is still that hesitation to sponsor anyone that is offshore. So always in any situation, it's best to be able to get to Australia first and then see how things go from there. Which does make that, if you're able to come on the working holiday visa, that being a cheaper option. I think it is $495 at the moment. I think it might have increased a little bit, but it's much cheaper to come. So it can be a good way to start things off. If your working holiday visa does not come back for a while, but then the borders open, can you fly in as a traveller or on a tourist visa and then wait for the visa to be processed while out here? You could, but you'd need to leave and re-enter the country to activate your working holiday visa. Is that right, Darren?
Sorry, what was that again?
Oh, so Hannah's just posed the question, if the working holiday visa does not come back for a while, is not approved for a while, but the borders open, could they come in on a tourist visa and then wait for the visa to be processed while out here? And I was saying that you do need to leave and re-enter the country to activate the visa. This is my understanding.
Yeah,
I was just double checking.
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah, it's an offshore visa, so you have to be offshore. So you could come in on the tourist visa, go to Bali or New Zealand for a week, and then re-enter on the working holiday visa. Yeah. So I just want to just change something. When you get the invite from the Australian government, they've changed. It's not 90 days; it's 60 days now. Sorry about that. So once you get the invite, it's 60 days, not the 90.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Good to have the most up-to-date information. So just on working holiday visas, if anyone listening has been affected by COVID-19, there is the ability to reapply if you had to either suddenly leave because of COVID-19, or if you weren't able to enter and use the working holiday visa that you had. So from July 1st of July 2021 to the 31st of December 2022, holders and former holders of COVID-19 affected working holidaymaker visas are able to make a fee-free application online, whether offshore and are able to come or forced to leave early. So they're the two situations that you might have been in. If that's you, good news. So you might have heard of the new UK to an Australia trade deal and be wondering what that means for working holiday maker visas. So the information that's currently available is the agreement is in principle, no changes have been made yet, but the expectation is that it will happen within 5 years. The maximum eligible age is going to be increasing from 30 to 35. And you'll be able to stay for up to 3 years with no requirement to do that regional or designated work to get that 3 years, which is great news, but it's not happening yet. Did you want to add anything about that one, Darren?
Not really. No, we just get heaps of inquiries saying, "Oh, it's now 35. Can I go to Australian working holiday?" Unfortunately, it's not in play yet. But when it does, that's going to be a fantastic opportunity for people. 3 years up to the age of 35 with no restrictions of the one employer. That's going to be a great visa for everyone.
Yep. Yep. Great. Natalie's put in the chat as well. Is she correct in thinking that she has to be under 30 with no children for a working holiday visa?
Yeah, that's 2 of the requirements. So she has to apply before she's 31 and no children. That's correct, yeah. Well, you can have children, but obviously you can't travel with the children. So it does ask you in the application. So we have had exemptions where people with children have been able to go, but the children will not be able to travel with you. So, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they can't come as a dependent on that visa.
No, correct. That's right.
All right. So next question, should I apply for my working holiday visa now or wait until the border opens?
Well, look, I mean, you're eligible to apply for it now. If you've definitely made the choice that you want to come to Australia, then yeah, get it in the system. It's a bit like an EOI. If you're in the system, as soon as it does open, you'll be at the front of getting your visa.
Yep. All right. Fantastic. And will processing times be impacted by the border closure?
Definitely. We've seen, a lot of the visas on hold. The 189, obviously, with only 250 visas available in July. The working holiday is not being processed at the moment, but they will soon. And we're all hopeful that in the new year, there should be good news for everyone when the visas all start being processed and you can come to Australia and enjoy the lifestyle over here.
Yeah, fantastic. And are the processing times listed on the website affected at the moment? I noticed when I went on the other day, the working holiday visa processing time was saying it's 3 to 6 months, but that seems quite long to me. Is that correct?
Yeah, before COVID, I mean, they were coming through within, sometimes they were instant. If there was no medical issues, it would come back the next day. So on average, it was anywhere between a week to 2 weeks. So a lot of the dates on the Australian government website are incorrect because they just don't update it on a regular basis. So, I mean, obviously there's none at the moment. So, but once it does open, those timeframes could be anywhere from a day to 3 weeks if we get back to pre-COVID timeframes.
Yeah. All right, fantastic. And Natalie's got another question. So I think this is relating to the children. Can they get a separate visa for? So the questions: can they get a separate visa for a dependent if my partner and I apply for a working holiday visa? So there's not a child-specific visa, is there, Darren?
No, not. The circumstances we've had is people coming out with children is the husband has come to Australia into a fly-in, fly-out occupation, earning really big money. So it was viable for the husband or the wife to come out and earn big money while the other partner stayed with the child. So that's where we've seen a working holiday visa granted for someone with a child. If both of you coming out and you've got children, then no, you wouldn't be able to apply under the working holiday visa, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. So Hannah's put in a question about the timeframes that we've been asking. So when we've been talking about the new year, is that as in the start of the new year, or could it be March 2022 or later? They're just trying to decide what to do before making the move.
Yeah, look, I wish I had a crystal ball. We keep saying the new year because it sort of covers all the bases. Look, realistically, I don't think temporary visa holders, working holiday visas, 491 skilled visa holders will be able to get into Australia till more of the middle of next year. So maybe June, July. They've only just opened it up to the parents of Australian citizens and permanent residents on the 1st of November. So I think, yeah, probably you'll be looking at, mid next year if you're looking at a temporary visa. Yeah.
And that's without an exemption, isn't it?
Yeah, correct. That's if you don't need an exemption. So I mean, you can still get visas if you get an exemption. We've had some employee sponsored visas approved recently. One for a glazier who's not on the PM SOL. We got an exemption for him. So there are visas available, but it has to be a very good reason why the Australian government gives you an exemption to allow you to come to Australia.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Rick's mentioned from what he's gleaned, would coming over into a relief teacher role be more advantageous to secure work, which would then make a teacher more attractive to permanent employment in another school? Yeah, so I think what you might be saying is coming over on a working holiday visa and doing relief teaching work to begin with would open up doors because you're in the country. Schools can see what you like, and then there might be other opportunities either for you to secure your own visa or for sponsorship. So yes, that scenario is a good one. And even having work experience in Australia can sometimes be appealing to schools. That can be a bit of a question mark as well for some.
Yeah, Camille, another thing too is the working holiday visa is good and the employee sponsored, because once you've worked 12 months in Australia as a teacher, it'll give you a bonus of 5 points for your skilled visa as well. So if you're a little short of points, that's also a good way of getting extra points for your skilled visas. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. So we are at official question time, but we've had lots of great questions coming through already. So if there's any final ones, I've realized we've kind of ticked over time, but so Elliot's mentioned we're in the UK at the moment, but flying to Australia in December on a 408 visa via his wife's job. I believe the visa is for 18 months. Can I apply for a different visa while there that would allow us to stay in Australia based on your secondary teaching qualification, plan to be based in Queensland?
Yeah, I mean, once you're in Australia, and particularly Queensland, you can lodge a skilled visa or employee sponsored visa. Queensland open up their state sponsorship this week, but they're not sponsoring overseas applicants. So being in Australia and working in an occupation, that is on their list would open up a lot of doors for you. So yeah, definitely getting to Australia and being there will open more doors, and you will be applicable to apply for another visa.
All right, another one. Can you quickly talk about education for your own children from secondary through to uni in Australia, including the costs? Whoa, that's quite a question. It does really, really vary. So government school fees are quite minimal, and it really depends on the type of school. So the fees vary wildly. If you wanted to send your children through independent schools, those fees would be much, much higher. But then government schools are intended to be very affordable for parents. And there is then university, if your children were considered not, if you're able to somehow get onto permanent residency or citizenship, then your children could apply for fee help. I think it's called for
X?
yeah, HEX. The government subsidises university fees for Australian students, which makes it much more affordable. So for a HEX supported place, the fees are, I think they range from $3,000 a year to $6,000 or $8,000 a year. And then they're not paid, they don't need to be paid immediately. So I have a HEX debt. You just pay it off as you work in Australia. But for non-HEX fees, it's quite expensive. It's $20,000 to $30,000 a year or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, Camille, I mean, my children were in Australia, and then we moved to Scotland. What I found is it's very similar. The children can adapt. The teaching principles are very much the same in Australia and the UK, so you don't have to worry about that. And children, when they're young, they adapt anyway. So my children have probably been to 5 or 6 different schools over their period because of my work and moving around. The public system is very good in Scotland, and the public system is very good in Australia as well. And you can have got the option of private, and obviously private, is more expensive. So you just really got to work out where you're going in Australia, do your research, contact the schools. If you're a permanent resident, then you don't have to pay overseas school fees for, primary, secondary, or your university. So trying to get your PR is obviously the cheapest way to get your children educated. But just do your homework, contact the schools and find out the fee structure and take it from there.
All right, excellent. We've got another one. Megan asked, when it comes to accommodation, is this something you have to do on your own, or is there any help with that? So ANZ UK has a bit of an idea that everyone's going to have different taste when it comes to accommodation. So if you're coming, even if it's on a working holiday visa, you might want a really nice place, which would then cost a bit more, or you might want to save as much money as you can and get the cheapest place possible, and you don't care what it's like. So ultimately, you'll be selecting your own accommodation and making your own choices in that regard, but we will point you in the right direction. So there's multiple different websites we can point you to that help get you an idea about costs involved, and then also finding accommodation. There's even there's a particularly flourishing Facebook group that does help you find accommodation as well that we can direct you to. So there are, and some of the websites here are really great. If you're coming long term and you're looking to buy, you can get some really good statistics on different suburbs and how much that might cost you and things like that. Kirsten has mentioned that she's 65 years old. Is this too old to teach in Australia? But she does have family who are Australian citizens, a son and a grandchild. Does she have any options?
Being 65, probably the best option if having a child in Australia is a parent visa. So we'd have to see how many children she has. She meets the balance of family, which is you have the same amount of children in Australia than any other country, then you can apply for a parent visa. That would get her out to Australia on a permanent visa with full work rights, entitled to free health cover, and after 10 years an Australian pension. So if you want to drop me an email or just go onto our website and fill out the parent visa form, I can send some details to you on that visa if you like.
Yeah, I'll just put your email in the chat, Darren, so everyone can send through any additional, more personal questions about that.
Yeah.
And yeah, there would be nothing prohibiting you from teaching at 65 either, so that's fine. And Natalie's just wondering if there's a similar Q&A for New Zealand. That's a good question. Not sure. We'll have to chat to EP Education, which is what we trade under is in New Zealand. And then Stephanie said, are teaching job start dates typically at the start of the Australian school year, or can jobs start dates throughout the year? Okay, yep. So the majority of teaching roles will start for the start of the school year, which is generally either the final day of January or the 1st of February. So that the majority do start then, but there will be some that come up throughout the year, generally at the start of a term. And Australia does have 4 terms, so there are multiple opportunities. Probably the second most popular start date would be mid-year starts, but that all kinds of situations pop up, and with leave replacement roles and different things, which can be a really good foot in the door at schools, they can start in any term really. Great. Hannah, you've done a 3-year primary education degree. Would you need to complete a PGC to have qualified teaching status? Yes, so there's a Northampton University offer a PGC top-up, which tends to be a really good option for anyone in a variety of situations where their qualification isn't going to be recognised by Australia. The only other option, as I mentioned before, you might have missed it, is to register in New Zealand first and then Australia. But if that only works if you're coming on a working holiday visa and you don't have long-term plans to stay in Australia. As we've mentioned, a degree in Australia is pricey, and there isn't a 1-year option in Australia anymore. We don't have graduate diplomas for teaching. The only option is doing a Master of Teaching. So there's one tiny quirk that I found. There's a year course that allows you to teach food technology, which is a year, and that's the most affordable course you can do. That gives you enough extra qualification, so that gives you a 4th year of teaching. That's $10,000 or $15,000, but it's the cheapest thing you can do. Food technology teachers are in demand, so it's a good skill to have. But yeah, if you were to come to Australia and then study, that would be your option. So it's probably preferable to do it in the UK, where you can do a 1-year degree. Great. Well, I think we might wrap up there because we have gone a bit over time. Thanks so much for coming along, everyone. And then anyone listening to the recording, you've made it to the end. Well done. And if you do have further questions, if they're visa related, definitely reach out to Darren. And if they're more teaching related, you can reach out to me. You should all have my email address, but just in case, I'll pop it in the chat quickly. And we look forward to supporting you in your adventure.
Yep.
Have a great day, everyone.
Yep. Have a great day, everyone, and thanks for attending. Thanks, Carmel, for putting this on. Really appreciate it.
No worries at all.